welcome everybody to the ninth episode of a show about basketball. Joined by a very special guest today. Man, we did all we could for you, buddy. We played Justin Jackson for 28 minutes, and we you guys got the win, but unfortunately fell short. I'm joined by the man, the myth, the legend, the guy who created the Mikal Bridges trend on Twitter the other night. His name is Mike, and he runs the account at Protected Pick. Go ahead and give us your little spiel, Mike.
Yeah, well, I'm just gonna address the Mikal Bridges thing. That was a complete accident, for the record. As the best things on the internet tend to be, I think the harder you try to make something go viral, the harder you try to make a meme, the less likely it is to succeed. I just offhandedly made a joke about how all you have to do is tweet Mikal Bridges and you'll get like 100 likes from Suns people on Twitter. And that set off a firestorm of tweets that were just the word Mikal Bridges. I think within a few hours it got up to almost 10,000 tweets of people just saying Mikal Bridges. So that was a complete accident. But yeah, I host a podcast called The Timeline, a Phoenix Suns podcast. I've been covering the Suns for about 2 years. I tweet a lot. My Twitter account is mostly for fun. The podcast is more the serious basketball analysis. But yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk to you about basketball.
Yes, sir. The Mikal Bridges trend. I think I got on like an hour and a half after like you originally tweeted it. And I was just like, what is going on? I was just scrolling through seeing Mikal Bridges. And the funny thing about it was the game was like at like noon or 2, and this all happened at like 10 o'clock at night. So I was like, oh no.
Yeah, the night before, yeah.
And then he didn't, or yeah, it was the night before. There was no game.
It was between games. It was
It was between the Sixers and the, I don't know, well, yeah, you probably know the other game. It was right after the Sixers or right before the Sixers, right?
It was right before the Sixers game, which was great. A great time for Mikal Bridges to trend because for people who pay close attention to the NBA will remember Mikal Bridges was actually drafted to the 76ers, a team that his mom works for. So his mom was very excited for him to be on the team that she actually works for. And then he was in the middle of doing an interview about what it would be like to play for his hometown team when he was traded to the Phoenix Suns. So every time Mikal Bridges plays against the 76ers, there's this sort of subplot that exists around that matchup because the 76ers had a chance to draft him and then traded him away for what ended up being Zaire Smith and what will now be an unprotected Miami pick, which is not as valuable as people thought at the time because Miami ended up trading for Jimmy Butler, by the way, from the 76ers. All very roundabout way of everything happening, but every single time he plays against the 76ers, there's a weird conversation to be had. Of course, Mikal Bridges had a great time in the bubble. He played really well and showed out against the 76ers. And it turned out, after all of that, I saw in the Philadelphia Inquirer, they actually wrote about Mikal Bridges trending, which I thought was hilarious because it's barely a story. But they wrote about it. And then eventually it all culminated with DeAndre and Mikal Bridges talking in a what they called like bubble side chat live on Twitter. And somebody asked him about it, and he said that he logged on the morning after because it was 1 a.m. in Orlando when this was happening.
Yeah, it was
and
late
he logged
at
on
night.
the morning after and just found he just found that he was trending, and he had to figure out why, and turned out it was no reason at all.
No reason at all. Well, I mean, there's a reason. Like, he is insane. Like, he's a steal at what was he, 12? What was he, 13?
Yeah. I think it was the 10th pick, or maybe it was later. It was a trade, so
Yeah. Well,
it's hard to remember
that's probably
exactly what it was.
why Philly like kind of was. They probably didn't. There was probably a deal in place before they even picked the kid, so it probably wasn't like, oh, we're gonna draft him and then let's trade him. You know, it's probably just like, oh.
No, so that's interesting. So that's actually not how it happened.
Oh damn.
Zaire Smith ended up being available for the Suns, where the Suns picked. And because Zaire Smith was available for the Suns had, I don't remember whose pick it was. I think it was the Bucks pick. It was a pick that we traded for, right? The Suns drafted DeAndre Ayton first in that draft.
Right.
And then because Zaire Smith was available, and for whatever reason, Philadelphia viewed them both as equal prospects, that turned out being way wrong. Way wrong.
Yeah, I mean,
Zaire Smith's barely played in the NBA at all.
yeah, exactly.
But the Suns actually made the call, and they offered them up and to trade, and they included that future Miami pick. And apparently a minority owner, this is something that I just learned last week, a minority owner for the 76ers pushed hard for that trade to go down because they thought of them as equal prospects. And yeah, now 76ers fans, every single time he has a good game, show up in my mentions because, of course, I'm talking about Mikal Bridges, just bemoaning the fact that Zaire Smith has barely played and Mikal Bridges looks like one of the best defenders in the NBA.
Yeah, that's so. I mean, they from a certain standpoint, they look similar. Like, I guess, excuse me, they're both athletic two guards. But Zaire Smith,
Yeah.
I don't think has ever played a lick of defense in his life. Not a knock on Zaire Smith.
Right,
He
it's
has
like
a
an
potential,
archetype, like a...
But yeah, it's
Yeah.
definitely Mikal Bridges. I knew who Mikal Bridges was going into the draft, and I only pay attention
Yeah.
to the draft when the Mavs have a good pick. So if I know who you
Yeah.
are, then like you're probably pretty good.
2 NCAA championships with
So he was
Mikal
on-
Bridges for Villanova.
So he was on both with Jalen Brunson.
He was
on
on both.
That's nice. I didn't know that.
On both of those teams, and he played all 4 years. And
Okay.
and like you said, I understand the idea that they're a similar archetype, right? Because they're coming into the NBA as like potential 3 and D role players, but at some point you have to value winning.
No.
I mean, if anything, what Mikal Bridges showed in the bubble for the Suns was that the idea of a win or go home format, which essentially the Suns to have any chance of making the playoffs, they had to go 8-0. It turns out it was still out of their hands, which we knew ahead of time. But it did not faze him at all. And to be fair to the 76ers, like you can't really predict all the weird medical issues that Zaire Smith had. Maybe he'll be good.
No.
Who knows?
No, he's had plenty of injuries going up and down. So you talked about the bubble. Before the season started, and even when the season started, I'm sure you were very well aware that y'all started 7-4, and toward the end of the year, y'all went 12 of your last 13. You lost one time in your last 13 games, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It was something like that. Anyway,
Yeah, if you're including the bubble in there,
including
right?
the bubble and including the
Yeah.
the wins against Milwaukee and the other 3. You had 3 big wins at the end of the year. 4 big wins at the end of the year. Before the season started, last season actually, I asked Isaac Gutierrez I believe he's from LA. I asked him, hey, what do you think the market is for Rubio? Like, where do you think he'd go? And then he told me Phoenix. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. It's kind of one of those younger teams that needs veteran leadership. And all year, he kind of proved, that he could turn that offense around, which is what they desperately needed. I mean, your starting point guard last year was Bonga? Or I don't even know. Who was your starting point guard last year?
It was basically a garbage can with a Suns jersey on it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know.
It
if
was a
Javon
series
Carter...
of point guards. It never worked out. Javon Carter started some games. Man, I don't even remember. It was such a bad rotation.
Yeah.
Elie Okobo started some games. It ended up being
Okobo,
absolute
that's right.
garbage. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Isaiah Kanan, there's the name. Isaiah Kanan broke
yes.
his ankle.
Yeah,
He was probably the best point guard that the Suns had in that time, and think about how bad that is.
Yeah, that is nothing compared to Rubio, who just come off 2 years of playoff experience in Utah, and he got a lot of hate for that contract. 3-year, I think it's 75, which is very fair for a guy who I guess he's 29 now. He's an NBA veteran. It makes a lot of sense to me, and like I said, he came in and completely changed the offense. But I don't want to keep harping to you about the bubble. I know you've heard it plenty. But what do you think going forward the Suns need to do in the draft? Well, I'll ask you about the draft in a minute. Going forward, what do you think the Suns need to do in free agency?
So I think both of those questions are interesting because the Suns actually took a lot of heat in the previous offseason. One, for the Rubio contract, just like you said, but also the Suns had I think it was number 6 overall pick. They traded the 6th overall pick to Minnesota for a combination of Dario Saric and the 11th overall pick. With that 11th overall pick, they picked Cameron Johnson, which was, and a lot of people had him slotted to be like in the 20s. So people considered that a reach. I'll tell you this, my general opinion on the draft is I don't care what the general consensus is. If you have a guy you want, pick him wherever. It just doesn't really matter. The only thing that you get heat for is from a bunch of people who are convinced that their draft opinions are better than everyone else's. And I genuinely don't care about those people's opinions. I mean, they all told me Dennis Smith Jr. was going to be good.
Hey,
so, like,
dude,
in general...
You're coming on the wrong podcast slandering Dennis Smith Jr., I'll tell you that right now. But anyway, Karen.
Well, tell you this. Nate Duncan rated Dennis Smith Jr. higher than Devin Booker.
Oh, well,
So,
hey.
you know,
that's him.
This is the kind of thing that we're dealing with as Suns fans.
I got you, I understand, but you're talking to someone who has a signed Dennis Smith Jr. jersey right behind him.
Well, if you want to hang that up, you can. I don't know that that's going to be very valuable in 10 years, though.
It means a lot to me.
I just think, in general, I think that... So I was surprised by that pick as well. I wanted Brandon Clark. In general, I thought Brandon Clark was going to be really good.
Mm-hmm.
I have heard from some people that the reason Brandon Clark fell to where he fell was not related to his talent or skill. Let's just say that. And it's not an attitude thing either. Maybe his health could be an issue later in his career. Let's just say that. I don't know how true this is, but I've heard this before. So I'm not as angry about that as I was previously. I'll say that. But I think the point I'm trying to make is what the Suns did this year, the success that they had was, first of all, when Ricky Rubio, Devin Booker, and DeAndre Ayton all played, I think they were 20 and 14.
Yeah.
A winning record with all three of those guys. The most
we were 20 and
successful
9 at one
lineups
point.
with those...
So, yeah.
Yeah. The most successful lineups with those three guys included essentially two small forwards. So some combination of Kelly Oubre, Mikal Bridges, and Cameron Johnson. Cameron Johnson in the bubble justified that pick entirely. You could still argue maybe Brandon Clark could be picked above him.
Especially against us in that first game.
Yeah, I mean, he really showed out in that game. He struggled a little more shooting the ball after that, and that's his main number one skill. But the spacing he provides, even when he misses the shots, are still valuable because you have to play up on him.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting thing where do the Suns value those lineups with those guys in the starting lineup enough to not go after a big name in free agency? We just, on our YouTube channel, you can find it if anyone's interested, the timeline, a Phoenix Suns channel, I think is what it's called. We just released a free agency evaluation of Christian Wood. Christian Wood is an unrestricted free agent somehow and is still relatively young. I will be very interested to see, because I like Christian Wood, I think he'd be a good fit, but do the Suns need a sort of prototypical power forward, or will they continue to roll with sort of a three-wing lineup, if you will, with Devin Booker, Mikal Bridges, I think, can no longer not be in the starting lineup. Yeah. He deserves it. And then whoever that third wing is. So, you know, I personally am on the fence about both of those options. I think it's rare that unrestricted young potential all-star becomes available in free agency like Christian Wood, or even like Jeremy Grant, for example, is another example. I know that Mavs fans really like. That's another example for the Suns where they could look at Jeremy Grant and say, is that somebody that they want in free agency? That could be really interesting. So I don't know. I think that we have a lot of time to think about it and talk about it on our podcast. So maybe I'm being a little bit coy with how I feel. But I definitely am going to monitor closely how James Jones, who is the Suns general manager, talks about this offseason, because he tends to tell you how he feels. And you can believe it in general.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you in the same boat. Like, the Mavs either need a big who can get some stops, or they need a bunch of wings. And in today's NBA, I don't think there is a such thing as a shortage of wing players. You can never have enough. You need as many 3-and-D wing players as you can possibly get. Like, I told someone I'd rather have 7 Dorian Finney-Smiths over like one, I can't remember who the player was, but one dude who like equaled the same contract. And they're like, well, that doesn't make sense. It's like, well, no, it makes perfect sense. You have a guy, you have a guy that can guard every position and then shoot threes. That's all you need in today's NBA. Ask Pascal, all of those guys.
Yeah. Yeah, look at all of the best teams in the NBA. I mean, for example, look at the Lakers right now. They're missing a few of their wings, and they struggled. And that's not even like a huge... Or even the Trailblazers, who did well, but were so awful defensively because they were missing a few wings in the bubble. And just that, I think, really highlights it. And another example, I think, is the Suns. Kelly Oubre Jr., who started this entire year, is injured. He tore his meniscus late into the season and was unavailable for the bubble games. At the beginning of the year, people were asking, how are the Suns going to find minutes for Mikal Bridges, Cameron Johnson, and Kelly Oubre Jr.? Well, if you consider all three of those guys as a small forward, that's a fair question to ask. But when you're now splitting the minutes between all three of those guys, between small forward and power forward, now the Suns go into the bubble. They're starting Mikal Bridges and Cameron Johnson, and they have no wings coming off the bench at all. So they're playing three-guard, sort of Rick Carlisle style, three-guard lineups off the bench. So it just proves that the more you have, the better, because those guys are interchangeable positionally. All of those guys can essentially play from 2 to 4. And so the more the better, just like you said, especially if you have guys like Devin Booker or Luka Doncic who can make the right read and make the right play as a playmaker.
Exactly. No, you're 100% right about that. And that's the good thing about, we'll switch over to draft. That's the good thing about this upcoming draft is you and Mav Draft both have told me that the threshold, you want one of the top picks, obviously. Even if you don't keep it, you want to trade it, whatever. You want one of the top picks, but the threshold between 15 and 45 isn't really that big, and they're all kind of really young, really raw athletic wings, which is what we need. It's what you need, and it's what basically every team needs. And that's why I'm so infatuated with Jaren Jackson, is because he literally can do everything on the basketball court you ask him to. But that's a different that's a different story. If
other than play defense without fouling.
Okay. Anyway.
Hey, I'm speaking facts here.
Oh no, I know. Well, he'll get it. Don't worry. But so
that's what we said about Marquise Chris.
Oh, stop. I'll get Serge Ibaka to come take you out. Anyway, so you messed me up. Hold on.
The draft.
Oh yeah. You have a 13.9% chance of moving up to 1. Yeah. Okay.
Into the top 4.
Into the top 4.
3% chance of moving up to number 1. 13.9% of moving into the top 4.
So my 4 guys, you can give me anyone you want, obviously, because you know way more about it than me. My 4 guys I would consider LaMelo Ball, Anthony Edwards, James Wiseman, and oh god, who's the 4th? Who's the Anthony Edwards? James Wiseman.
Killian Hayes, maybe?
And no, it was a bigger dude. Either way, those are my 3 guys. James Wiseman would be my guy. If I were y'all, what do you think about who would you take with one of the top 4 picks though? If you had to take if you got the first pick, who would you take?
So I think that if the Suns got the first pick, there's a good chance they would trade it. A pretty good chance.
True. Yeah,
I think that
is kind of like that. I feel like a lot of people who might get it would trade it. Oh, it was Denny. Denny was the 4th guy. 3 and D. 3.
Oh, Denny's good too.
Shooting wing, yeah.
So the Suns have the basically 14% chance of moving into the top 4 picks. It's an interesting draft where if the Suns moved into the top 4, I think there's a good chance that they look at a guard outside of the top 4. If they keep their pick where they're slotted now, the 10th pick, I think it's more likely they look for a wing. It just depends on who's available. There's always the possibility of Halliburton being available at 10. Then maybe you take a guard at that point. At some point, the Suns have to plan for a future without Ricky Rubio. He's only signed for 2 more years. He turns 30 next season. Not old. He had his highest. I don't know if most people know this. He had his highest shooting percentage from 3 this season that he's ever had in his career. So there's a slight Jason Kidd trajectory for him, where maybe it's okay to have him as he ages and continue to start him. But if you can get a high-level prospect, I like Killian Hayes a lot personally if you're in the top 4. If you can't get a prospect that could be the future starting point guard for the Suns, maybe you should.
Yeah, and
like I said,
definitely could use some more playmaking. You don't have plenty of 3 and D wings because, like I said, there's never enough. But you only have Booker, Carter, and Rubio really making plays for y'all. And there's also you need more of that in the NBA too.
Yeah, well, the Suns actually did average the most assists in the NBA this season, but that's mainly because Ricky Rubio and Devin Booker are such great playmakers. They have two guys that could make the right passes at all times, and then guys like Dario Saric are pretty good. But yeah, no backup guard. And part of the reason the Suns were so successful in the bubble was Cameron Payne, who was like a surprise addition to the Suns. Cameron Payne is barely above replacement level. Now, he played better than he'd ever played before in the bubble with the Suns, but just having a barely replacement level guard coming off the bench for the Suns made such a massive difference. Because previously it was Ty Jerome who was a huge disappointment, I'll be honest, in his rookie year, and Elie Okobo, who really hasn't figured it out much in the NBA so far. So just replacing those guys' minutes with a guy like Cameron Payne made a big difference. So if they can find some sort of replacement in the future in that draft, you can. But like I said, here's why I would say they would trade if they got the number 1 pick. There are a few players, like Wiseman's not a good fit for the Suns specifically because of Ayton.
Yeah.
And I think he'll be good right away, or like relatively successful right away. Outside of him, I think in general, some of the top picks will have to be developed over time. And the Suns are on the clock a bit with Devin Booker. Now, he's signed for 4 more years under contract, but he spent 4 years on bad teams. It was only really this year that his teammates showed some promise. At some point, you can't really afford to continue developing players around him. You have to find guys who can win now. And I think that's why there's a chance that the Suns do something similar to what they did with Cameron Johnson, where they traded back, got a guy that can play now, because Cameron Johnson was the oldest guy in the lottery. He was capable of playing right now. And then also got a guy like Dario Saric who could also play with the team right away and win now. So I think there's a good chance that something like that happens. Now, I'm not super into the draft like our friend Rich, who runs at Mavs Draft, is, but this is basically where my opinion is at now. I'll be honest, now that the season's over, I'm going to dive into it a little bit more, so my opinions are a little more flexible, and I might change how I feel about it, but I think there's a good chance that if they jump, they trade. And even if they stay at 10, there's a chance they trade it.
Yeah, because it's like both of you have told me many times that it's just like 10 through 40 is just, there's not a big difference, and they're all NBA ready guys.
Yeah.
There's just not a huge like drop off, which is awesome because we have 18 and 31. Even though I don't think we keep either pick. I am looking forward to possibly seeing Desmond Bane, Saddiq Bey, either of the Williams dudes or Poku coming here. If we trade them and salary dump a couple of our guys, then that's even better for me.
The best scenario for the Suns for me is Devin Vassell.
Oh yeah,
and if the Suns jump to the, I love him so much. I think he has that Mikal Bridges type potential, and I'm the type of guy that if the Suns even jumped to 3 or 4, I'd still pick him. I don't care that people would criticize the Suns for picking him too early. There's always a chance if you trade back that somebody picks your guy before you do. Just pick the guy you want. Don't care what anyone says, and if they become successful, they become successful. I think too often people are more worried about the perception of the pick than
Yes.
actually what the player turns into. And I think Cameron Johnson is a great example of that. Completely trashed on the draft day and then successful in the time where the games mattered the most for the Suns. Maybe don't matter as much now that they're not in the playoffs, but that's the guy I like, and I wouldn't even care if they picked him 3rd or 4th.
Nice. Well, yeah, like any of those kind of guards would be nice. It's like you said. I feel like all the players in the top, like the people you think are gonna go top 5, like who the consensus top 5 people are, they're all kind of really raw. Like I don't see a lot of like NBA ready talent. Like there's no DeAndre Aidens, there's no Lucas, there's no Jarens, there's none of that in this draft. You got anything else on the draft?
No, like I said, I'm gonna learn a little bit more about it. So over time, if you guys do end up following me, I'll probably have some more opinions on it. But those are the guys I like for now. Devin Vassell is the guy that I'm kind of lasered in on, and he might even be available at 10 if the Suns keep that pick. But if they'd have to move up to get him, I'd be all for it.
Well, I'm sure I'll definitely talk to you more about it, especially post lottery, which I believe is next week.
Yeah, soon.
Yes. So talked about everything I wanted to touch on. except for we had a bubble, and the NBA announced that they were gonna do all bubble team. I'm not sure. I know there's an all bubble team, all bubble MVP, and all bubble coach. I don't know how much further it goes, and I don't know if there's one or two teams. But I'm gonna go ahead and give you my MVP, my coach, and my first all bubble team. And then you can comment on it, and then you can tell me what you think, or tell me yours.
Cool. Okay.
Point guard. I'm just gonna assume that it's 2 guards, 3 forwards. Point guard. Damian Lillard. It has to be.
Mm-hmm.
I got some flack for calling him Mario Chalmers with a green light, and Colin Sexton with a blockbuster card. But the Colin Sexton thing is high praise. But anyway, that's here nor there. Damian Lillard had an insane bubble. He literally carried his team to the playoffs. 2, of course, Devin Booker. His team went 8-0. He was the best player. He's the best player on the team, and that Kawhi Leonard buzzer beater, like, come on, he's the MVP. 3, I have Luka. Shit, I cannot remember my 4.
I can tell you
TJ
who I
Ward.
had for
TJ
4 and
Ward.
5.
TJ
Yeah.
Ward. TJ Ward and Luka for 3 and 4, and then Anthony Davis at 5. It's not a very popular one. I haven't seen him on anyone's list, but he's definitely. I mean, he played out of his mind. I think he missed a game. Maybe he even missed 2 or 1.5. But
I think he had one game with only 9 points, though. I think people tend to kill him for that one game.
It's Anthony Davis, and there's not that many. Like, I'm not giving it to Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid basically did nothing. And it was between him and AD. And you could put Jokic, but like, I consider Jokic a point guard, so and I don't think he played better than Booker, Aiden, or Luka, so I just can't, in good conscience, put him there. I'm probably being biased, but the center was the hardest one to pick. And then
I just put Giannis there.
Yeah, that you could do that, but I mean,
because he basically plays center.
But he coasted the whole bubble.
Yeah, but the Bucks look so good. Like, they looked really good. They picked up right where they left off. When the season ended, and you're right in that they barely have to try to win games, but I mean, that's a sign of how good they are to me.
Yeah, the only one that I questioned was AD. I was just like, well, I really like AD, and I guess you could put Giannis, you could put Jokic, but
no, I support the AD decision too. I think those are both worthy guys. Yeah, I think AD's really good, maybe the best or second best defensive player in the NBA.
Oh yeah. Definitely in the top 3. But like, I was going through, and I was like, the only people I was seeing was Jokic and Embiid, and I think I saw one guy pick Giannis. I was like, man, AD's not getting the love he needs, and I'm always one. I'm a huge AD guy, so I'm definitely always gonna be one to give him extra love. But then I have Coach. Coach is definitely Nate McMillan. He literally got his extension during the bubble, so yeah, I don't think it's even close. I think Nate McMillan. Coach,
okay, I have to gripe with that.
Monty Williams, yeah, I know he did great during the bubble too.
Bleacher Report predicted how many games the Suns were going to win in the bubble. How many games do you think they predicted?
2.
They predicted 0, and the Suns went 8-0.
Nice.
So, like, as far as coaching a team above their expectations, I don't think anybody did a better job than Monty Williams. And here's what I want to say about that specifically. Damian Lillard just ran high pick and rolls to beat teams over and over and over again. And Damian Lillard's unguardability, the way that it's impossible to guard him in that high pick and roll, is what won those games. Their defense was terrible.
Oh, yeah.
Other guys were not necessarily really showing up. To be a coach to just say, oh, make the guy who's unguardable in the pick and roll run pick and rolls, that's not coaching to me. And here's why I want to give a shout out to Monty Williams in that multiple games of the bubble, Devin Booker was in foul trouble. In one game, he only played 31 minutes. That was the Indiana game. In another game, he fouled out entirely. And when that happened, when he was in foul trouble and his minutes were restricted, other guys stepped up. And those other guys stepped up because of a smart game plan and an ability to plan for guys who maybe their skill set is limited. But if you plan right, if you coach right, if you have them focused, they can still take advantage of that limited skill set. And that's what the Suns did over and over and over again, and that's why they went 8-0. So I have to, in my mind, I have to give it to Monty.
I respect it. He was definitely my second or third choice. I think I don't. So I don't know. I get some hate. I get some flack for this too. I don't think the Celtics are as good as advertised.
No, me neither.
And I think Brad Stevens
I don't even
definitely
think the
deserves a lot
Bucks
of
are
credit.
as good.
Yeah,
I think
but
Indiana overperformed too. Indiana did, and I think that's fair to say because they had some like specific
Sabonis is out. You know,
things.
he's their all-star.
Sabonis was out. Victor Oladipo's not quite Victor
Oh
Oladipo
yeah, I
right now.
completely forgot about him.
Like yeah. So he's he is what he is. And then T.J. Warren was great, but I just think like when you defy expectations the way that Monty Williams did, you have to me you have to reward that in the right way, especially because I don't know, we haven't got to it yet, but I don't think Devin Booker's going to win that MVP, and I don't necessarily even think he deserves it at this point. I think that it's got to go to Damian Lillard. So if you're not going to reward him there, then I think Monty deserves a little love.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and tell you who my finalists for MVP are. I think Devin Booker deserves it for sure. But I think them not making it might hinder the narrative a little bit.
Yeah.
But it was definitely this whole bubble was the Luka, Devin Booker, Damian Lillard show. That is what we saw for the last
Right.
2 weeks. Like every night it was one of those three guys. Just you heard about them. They put up crazy numbers and they had great games. You mentioned the foul trouble. Ayton and Booker both had 5 fouls with 3 minutes left. With 8 minutes left in the third quarter of our game. I think that's what you were referring to when Booker fouled out. But yeah. No, I think it's one of those three guys. Obviously my bias comes out, and I think it should be Luka. He averaged like a 35 point, 12 rebound, 15 assist, triple double. That's just unheard of. But when I look at everything, when I look at winning basketball, it's like you said, Terry Stotts is Rick Carlisle. They're the same thing. Terry Stotts was the assistant coach of the 2011 championship team, which is the same. They run the same exact thing. High pick and roll. Let your point guard score. Let one of the guards score. That's exactly what they do every single time. And Booker just played out of his mind. Booker really a lot of people knew who Devin Booker was going into the bubble just because of the 70-point game and because of the absolute just elite 3-point shooting. But this was Devin Booker showing the entire league and the entire world, hey, I am taking over. I'm one of the top 3-4 shooting guards in the league. And I think winning record 8-0, 0.1% chance of making it according to some website. And he did every single thing he did, and hitting a buzzer beater over Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, that's ridiculous. So I think it should be Devin Booker.
Yeah.
But who are your finalists, or who do you think it should be?
Well, I also would want Devin Booker to win, but I genuinely believe it should be Damian Lillard. I think that that team was actually kind of bad throughout the bubble.
They were bad.
And without Damian Lillard, they would have won nothing. Nurkic obviously makes a huge difference. C.J. McCollum had a fractured back, and in some games played like it, the second half of that Nets game, for example. Yeah, I mean, what he had to do in order to will that team to victories is exactly what I consider an MVP in my mind, and I think that voters will as well. I think Damian Lillard will win. Now, the argument against Devin Booker has always been wins, like he's not winning.
Yeah.
Now he finally has that argument in his favor, which for some people may make them vote for Devin Booker. But I genuinely believe that Damian Lillard had an MVP type performance over an 8-game period. We're not talking about a full season here.
Oh yeah.
But he had to do some amazing things to win, and he did, and I think he deserves that MVP at this point. And it hurts me it pains me to say it because I'm a huge Devin Booker fan, but I think just what you said, Devin Booker showed on a huge stage with the lights brighter than they've ever been for the Suns, at least since Steve Nash, and he proved that he has superstar potential, that he is a superstar, not just an all-star, not just a good young guard, like a genuine superstar. And, that's almost, he's 23. Damian Lillard's 31. So it's almost more valuable to do what he did.
Yeah, exactly. Like you said, Damian scored 154 points over the last 3 games. So it's kind of really hard to argue against that. But but I think it'll end up being Lillard. I think it should be Luka, and I want it to be Luka or Booker. I think I said I think it will be Booker, but it's going to be Lillard. I'm almost certain. I don't know when those awards get
Yeah,
announced.
I'm pretty positive too.
It's just tough to argue, you know. And if I do argue, people will just be like, "Oh, well, you don't like Lillard." Yeah, but it's not worth it. Thanks. I don't got anything more for you today. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been one of my favorite episodes so far. You definitely, everybody, if you're still listening, be sure to check out his podcast. Be sure to follow him at Protected Pick, and be sure to check out his YouTube channel. I'll leave all three of those in the description, of course. And Mike, you got anything else?
No, that's it. I appreciate you having me on. It's been a fun conversation.
Yes, sir. I look forward to the many conversations we have in the future. It's gonna be it for me. Thank you all for watching, and go Mavs.